Welcome to the epic story of the Romanovs. Over more than 3 centuries, this remarkable family led Russia through transformative eras of triumph and challenge. From the visionary reigns of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, who propelled Russia onto the global stage, to the opulent but turbulent final days of Nicholas II, the Romanovs shaped Russia into a world power and left an indelible mark on its culture and identity. A story filled with splendor, family loyalty, war, and ultimately, tragedy. Join us on a journey through their remarkable history, starting with the visionary reigns of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great. In 1613, a 16-year-old boy named Mikhail Romanov was chosen as the first Tsar of the new Romanov dynasty. His election came at a critical moment for Russia, following years of chaos and civil unrest, known as the Time of Troubles. Mikhail's ascent to the throne restored stability to the nation, and though he was young and inexperienced, his rule marked the beginning of the Romanovs' long and storied legacy. Peter I, born in 1672, was a boy full of curiosity and energy. Unlike the typical princes of his time, Peter was fascinated by the world outside the palace walls. He was particularly intrigued by ships and the military. As a young man, Peter traveled across Europe incognito, visiting shipyards and learning modern military tactics. These experiences would later shape his vision for a transformed Russia, one that could compete with Europe's great powers. Peter the Great wasn't satisfied with the status quo. He believed that Russia needed to modernize in order to secure its place on the global stage. Upon his return from Europe, he launched an ambitious program of reforms aimed at bringing Russia into the modern world. Peter overhauled the military, introduced new administrative practices, and even forced the Russian nobility to adopt Western customs, including cutting their long beards. Peter's reforms weren't just for show. He had big ambitions for Russia's future. One of his primary goals was to make Russia a maritime power. To do that, he needed access to the Baltic Sea, which was controlled by Sweden. In 1700, Peter launched the Great Northern War against Sweden. The war lasted for over 2 decades, but in the end, Peter was victorious. With his triumph came the creation of Russia's first navy and the foundation of a new capital city, St. Petersburg. Peter's dream city, St. Petersburg, rose from the swamps along the Baltic coast. He envisioned it as a window to the West, a symbol of Russia's new European identity. Built with European architectural influences, St. Petersburg became the center of Russian political and cultural life. Though the construction came at great human cost, Peter's vision was realized. The city was a gleaming beacon of Russia's transformation. Peter's desire to modernize Russia wasn't limited to the military or the capital. He also reformed the economy, government, and society. He introduced a new taxation system, reorganized the Russian Orthodox Church, and established schools to train future leaders in science and technology. Peter's reign was nothing short of revolutionary, as he brought Russia into a new era of progress and power. Even in his later years, Peter remained devoted to his vision of a modern Russia. His relentless pursuit of reform often earned him enemies, but his determination never wavered. When he died in 1725, Peter left behind a transformed nation, one that was larger, stronger, and more unified than ever before. Peter the Great's legacy would endure for centuries, setting the stage for Russia's rise as a global empire. Fast forward to 1729, when a German princess named Sophia of Anhalt-Zerbst was born. Little did anyone know, this ambitious young woman would one day become Catherine the Great, one of Russia's most legendary rulers. Catherine came to Russia as the bride of the future Tsar, Peter III. Though her marriage was far from happy, Catherine proved to be a shrewd political player, learning the intricacies of Russian court life and preparing for her moment to seize power. At the age of 16, Sophia married Peter III, but their relationship was fraught with tension. While Peter III was an unpopular and eccentric ruler, Catherine quickly won the favor of the Russian military and nobility. After only a few months of Peter's reign, Catherine staged a coup, deposing her husband and taking the throne for herself. Her daring move paved the way for one of the most prosperous reigns in Russian history. Once on the throne, Catherine proved to be an enlightened ruler, inspired by the ideas of Europe's great philosophers. She corresponded with intellectuals like Voltaire and Diderot, promoting the ideals of reason, education, and justice. Catherine's reign saw the modernization of Russian law and government, with reforms that aimed to bring Russia closer to its European counterparts. However, Catherine also knew how to balance reform with autocratic power, securing her place as one of Russia's most influential rulers. Like Peter the Great, Catherine had grand territorial ambitions. Under her leadership, Russia fought successful wars against the Ottoman Empire and expanded its borders into Poland, Crimea, and the Caucasus. These victories solidified Russia's status as a major European power, and Catherine's empire-building efforts added vast new territories to the Russian crown. Catherine wasn't just a military leader. She was also a great patron of the arts and culture. She founded the Hermitage Museum, which became one of the world's greatest collections of art, and supported the creation of theaters, academies, and libraries. Catherine's reign ushered in a golden age of Russian culture, and her legacy as a supporter of the arts remains one of her most enduring contributions. Despite her many successes, Catherine's reign was not without challenges. In 1773, a major uprising known as Pugachev's Rebellion threatened to destabilize her rule. Led by a Cossack claiming to be the rightful Tsar, the rebellion gathered tens of thousands of supporters. Catherine's forces eventually crushed the uprising, but it was a reminder of the tensions simmering beneath Russia's surface. One of Catherine's most significant legacies was her work in education and legal reform. She established new schools, reformed Russia's legal code, and promoted scientific advancement. Catherine's emphasis on education and intellectual growth helped lay the foundation for Russia's future development, and her influence extended far beyond her lifetime. As she grew older, Catherine's health began to decline, but her spirit remained strong. She continued to govern with the same determination and vision that had defined her early reign, constantly writing and planning new reforms. In 1796, after a long and successful reign, Catherine the Great passed away, leaving behind an empire that was larger, stronger, and more prosperous than ever before. Catherine's death marked the end of an era, but her influence on Russia endured long after her passing. Her grandson, Alexander I, would later face Napoleon in one of Russia's greatest military challenges, and the empire that Catherine had helped build would continue to grow and prosper. Though Catherine was gone, her legacy continued to shape Russian history. Her reforms, military victories, and cultural contributions left an indelible mark on the nation, and future rulers would look to her reign as a model of enlightened leadership. Catherine's vision of a powerful, modern Russia helped secure the country's place as a dominant force in European politics. Nicholas II was born in 1868 into the powerful Romanov dynasty. Nicholas lived a life most could only dream of. But little did he know, he'd be the last to wear the crown. So how did it all go wrong? Let's start at the beginning. Growing up, Nicholas was groomed for royalty, but never quite prepared for the crown. His father, Alexander III, was a strict ruler, known for his strength and iron rule. Nicholas, on the other hand, was gentle and introspective. Many questioned if he'd ever have the tough spirit needed to lead a vast empire like Russia. When Nicholas's father died unexpectedly in 1894, he found himself thrust into power at just 26. Despite his doubts, he took the throne, pledging to uphold his father's legacy. But with little political experience, Nicholas felt unprepared and insecure in his new role as Tsar. One bright spot in Nicholas's life was his marriage to Alexandra, the love of his life. They shared a deep bond and were completely devoted to each other, which was rare for royal marriages of the time. Together, they had 5 children, including 4 daughters and their precious son, Alexei. Nicholas was a family man at heart, finding peace away from the pressures of ruling. While Nicholas found joy in his family, Russia was a land of unrest. The gap between the wealthy nobility and the poor was enormous, and calls for reform were growing louder. Poverty, harsh working conditions, and the lack of political freedom frustrated many. Nicholas tried to make reforms, but they often fell short of what people demanded. Then came the Russo-Japanese War in 1904, a conflict that Nicholas thought would strengthen Russia's position in Asia. But it was a disaster. Russia suffered defeat after defeat, which only intensified the people's anger and discontent with his leadership. By 1905, frustrations boiled over, and the First Russian Revolution erupted. Workers went on strike, protests filled the streets, and a brutal massacre, known as Bloody Sunday, shocked the nation. In response, Nicholas created the Duma, a representative assembly, to appease the people, but his reluctance to share power made it largely ineffective. In the years that followed, one controversial figure gained tremendous influence over the Romanovs, Grigory Rasputin. Rasputin, a mystical Siberian monk, claimed he could heal their son Alexei, who suffered from hemophilia. Alexandra grew to trust Rasputin completely, believing he was sent by God to protect her family, but his influence stirred rumors and angered many in the Russian court. In 1914, Nicholas made a fateful decision to enter World War I. At first, it seemed like a chance for Russia to prove its strength, but the war quickly turned into a disaster, with heavy losses and shortages of food and supplies back home. Soldiers were sent to the front poorly equipped, and morale plummeted as the war dragged on. Determined to turn the tide, Nicholas decided to take personal command of the Russian army in 1915. But his move left the government back in St. Petersburg largely in Alexandra's hands, who turned even more to Rasputin for guidance. This created a power vacuum and added fuel to the mounting crisis. With the war going terribly and supplies running out, Russia was at a breaking point. In February 1917, protests and strikes erupted across St. Petersburg. Nicholas was forced to abdicate the throne, bringing an end to over 300 years of Romanov rule. The people wanted change, and Nicholas's leadership had become a symbol of their suffering. After his abdication, Nicholas and his family were placed under house arrest, first in Tsarskoye Selo, and later moved to Siberia. Gone were the palaces and luxuries. The once glamorous life was now a humble and confined existence, as the family waited in uncertainty. In July 1918, the Romanovs were moved to the Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg. There, in the early morning hours, they faced a tragic and heartbreaking end. The entire family and their loyal servants were executed, marking the close of the Romanov dynasty. From the transformative reign of Peter the Great to the enlightened rule of Catherine the Great, the Romanovs forged a legacy that reshaped Russia, steering it through dramatic cultural and political changes that continue to shape its identity today. Yet, the dynasty's story, rich in power and vision, would come to a tragic end with Nicholas II. His story is remembered as that of a ruler caught between tradition and the demands of a changing world. Though deeply devoted to his family and country, Nicholas's reign marked the end of an era as he watched one of Europe's most powerful dynasties fall amid turmoil and revolution.